Let's go.
Let's
Brought back the
go.
intro a little bit for old time's sake. Why not? Haven't done that in a live stream in a while. Welcome. Everybody's been patiently waiting. Already got 100 people over here in the first minute. Clearly, I think everybody's ready for the draft to get here. I think we're ready to not hear about these stupid S2 scores anymore, and who's trading up into the top 5 and where's Trey Lance go. I'm just ready for it all to happen. Is Rodgers going to be traded on day 1 or day 2? I'm over it, EJ. I'm over the stories. I'm ready to be done. But we only got 6 days left, and then this hell is over, and we can finally actually get to the real offseason.
Yeah, TikTok, it's coming. It feels like it is a very smooth, straight hill until Wednesday, probably morning, when we start the stream over on Film Room, and then we're going to do the Draftsmas Eve stream here. That's my red and green lights. Connor, thanks for showing up. He said, bootleg Christmas is my favorite day because we started releasing rankings today. So I went with the red and green lights to be a little bit seasonal, but it feels like a very straight line between here and Wednesday. I don't know about you. Lots still to do, but both looking forward to it. And yeah, sort of draft fatigue is real. And just kind of, this is the power through section. DJ says when he was a scout, they called it to just move the ball down the field, right? Just keep doing your work. And that's a couple of weeks ago. And then you get to this point, which is just hey man, I'm really tired. And coach is asking for one more rep. Okay. Gotta stay up, finish those rankings. Gotta make those adjustments. Gotta make those last minute pods. But it's great. This is what we do for a living, and it's because of all of you, and it's killer. It's a lot of fun. We're trading DMs at 2 a.m. about players we're watching, and
I don't remember the last time you and I were not messaging past midnight at this point. It's been a while.
I don't know, 9 weeks ago, 10 maybe. Yeah, it's been a while.
It's okay. June will get here soon enough. Also, making things even more complicated, college conferences decided that NFL or college film is all of a sudden a no-no on YouTube. It's like, okay, well, we could have let us know about 3 months ago, and we would have avoided that. Had to unfortunately delete a couple episodes, but those are coming back without film. They will be posted before the draft. Most of you have already seen them, but just in case you haven't, it's the Defensive Gems episode and the most recent episode,
Short Kings.
Yep, Short Kings. Those will be up without film, so that our channel doesn't get nuked. Unfortunately, that's been something we've been working on the last few days, but it's okay, EJ.
Yeah, a little wrinkles in the process. Now, we know that it makes the fan experience worse. It obviously is not our choice. This has always been a big gray area that went back and forth. We're not trying to do anything wrong or steal anybody's property. We're trying to make sure that you as fans understand what's going on the field, elevate the discussion about these players, these conferences, these positions. They don't see it that way. They have legal right to it. They can shut us down if they want to. So we have to strip it out. That means the videos we have in process as well, we kind of had to change tracks and stop doing what we're doing and get to a place where we were sort of clean of film. It'll look a lot like it used to for a lot of longtime viewers, but know that you want it, and we will do everything we can to get it. There's nothing we can do to get it right now. It's not like we're not paying some fee that we should be paying. This isn't a backdoor thing. It's a not available thing. So we're working on it. It'll get fixed eventually. In the meantime, buck up and do what I'm going to do. I'm going to open a beer on a Friday.
Jack Hunter with our first question. Little something for the bootleg versus SEC lawyer fund. Thank you, Jack. Buzzing for the draft. Who are some of the teams who, in your opinion, are just penciled in to take a certain player in the first round? At this point, again, we're doing pencil, not pen. Even for Bryce Young, I would say that's pencil, not pen, even though it's a fairly dark pencil. But beyond Bryce Young, I would say if the Texans can't trade out of the second round pick, I'm penciling in, or second overall pick, I'm penciling in Will Anderson there. I'm penciling in Tyree Wilson to the Seahawks because he just fits. Like, he just feels like a Seahawk. Witherspoon to Detroit feels pretty spoken for to me as well. especially considering they just offloaded Okuda. That one seems pretty likely. And then I don't know how far Jalen Carter is going to fall, but I don't think he's getting past 9 to the Bears. I would be stunned if he got past 9 to the Bears. So let's technically say pencil that one in, even though it requires Carter to get there in the first place.
Yeah. No, I'm less with you on the Detroit pick, with you on the other picks before that. The Carter pick, I'm with you. He will not fall past 9. If he does, there's been some change that we don't know about. As of a couple weeks ago, I really don't think that's possible, but you're right. He might not get there. Some other team might say, we want him more. Again, if you're just looking at film, it's either Bijan or Jalen Carter is the best player in this draft, period, regardless of position. Like, those are the guys that are just blue chip players if you look at film. And that's going to be tempting, but obviously with Jalen Carter, there's another layer. That doesn't mean he's getting out of the top 10. Yeah. From everything that we've heard, he's not getting out of the top 10. So, the Detroit one's weird. I think Detroit could go a lot of ways, and I've heard a lot of weird stuff about Detroit, and there's a lot of, I think it's just, there's so much smoke around the Detroit one that I don't have a solid feeling, and maybe that was their intent, is to just cloud the waters so they can take their guy. What you said about Witherspoon makes perfect sense. And a lot of people said that as soon as Okuda was traded, that they were either going to take Witherspoon or Gonzalez, and Witherspoon seems much more the Dan Campbell type to me than Gonzalez does. Not that Gonzalez is a bad player. It's just a play style, play fit thing. But then their wide receiver core got nuked today. So I don't think they're going to address that early.
Down? That's
What's
the thing,
that?
is that if, let's just say one of the top 4 quarterbacks slips to 6. Do they trade down and maybe get in on like the JSN? Because Tennessee, we think, wants to come up. Like,
that's the thing, is if they stay, I would say, corner makes a lot of sense. But I've heard other things which didn't make as much sense to me. But I do not think that Brad Holmes is locked into staying at 6 and picking. Like, I very much think, if somebody wants to pay them a premium, they could go get other players. They're not going to get out of the range of a place where they could get players.
Chad already trolling you. Is Kenny McIntosh still Alvin Kamara? They're never going to let that go.
Well,
they're never going to let that go.
Again, it's, you say something about a role or a thing, and in the case of McIntosh and Chimera, it's the pass catching. I said right then, McIntosh is not the runner, Chimera is, but that doesn't matter. People weld it together in their brains, which is why I hate comps. Because you can't have a nuanced discussion. You can't say that without people going, you said McIntosh was Chimera. No, I said he catches the ball, and if he gives you that element in this draft more than some other people that are being tagged as that, he's not Chimera. Is he like Chimera in the passing game? More so when Chimera was coming out of Tennessee than some other players in this draft. So, but
also,
shout out to you.
Very few running backs ever have been Chimera, if we're being honest, like in terms of
this is the thing that I love about draft discussions is Chimera wasn't Chimera. Chimera got picked where he got picked because he was overlooked, right? He wasn't used in college the way, and he got to the pros and exploded, and everybody said, why did we let him slip? This is the draft conversation you get to have, but now everybody goes, oh yeah, Chimera's first rounder. Like, he wasn't at the time. Like,
hell, he got chased off Alabama's roster. Couldn't even
preach to the choir. Like, but the revisionist piece is, I see Alvin Kamara as a perennial Pro Bowler. You said X player who has a similar profile in one way is him. I don't see that lining up. Well, it doesn't. That's not the same thing. If we're talking about Chimera coming out of Tennessee, the pass catching piece with McIntosh is similar. We'll see.
Yeah. Don't forget Stone Forsythe. That's my cross to bear, Stone Forsythe.
We all have plenty of them. It's a graveyard full of those. So,
D Millenick for $10. Thank you, D. Are all the QBs other than Bryce Young likely to be on the board at 4 now? If so, who are the Colts most likely to pick? If Stroud, Richardson, or Levis? I wouldn't say they're likely to be on the board.
No,
somebody's going to go up to 3. Arizona's been trying to get out of that pick for 3 months. Yeah. Somebody's going to go up to 3. I just don't know who for, because I think it's clear that the Texans are not in on Stroud. I don't believe they would take Levis at 2. I don't believe that. I think they would take Will Anderson. But if somebody's going up to
You're
3,
projecting.
I'm projecting, but if somebody's going up to 3, it depends on the team that's going up in terms of what quarterback I think they would take. It's very possible that both Richardson and Levis are there for Indy at 4. And if it was me, I would take Richardson. I don't know how the Colts feel about him. Now, I know just based on what Steichen did with Jalen Hurts, like who I think fits Steichen's offense the best to me is Richardson. But again, like Ballard just doesn't care what other people think. Ballard's going to do what Ballard's going to do. And hell, if Richardson goes at 3, because somebody's obsessed with Anthony Richardson, we know there's like at least 6 teams that are obsessed with Anthony Richardson. If Stroud's there at 4, they probably just go with Stroud. So I don't know how to answer that question, because I don't know who's going to 3. If that trade already happened, I'd have a better idea. But I don't think it's going to happen until the cards are on the clock.
Yeah, I would agree that I believe that 2 quarterbacks at minimum will be off the board by 4. It's very possible that it's 3. If the Texans trade out of the pick, somebody wants to go get Stroud and or Richardson, they'll do that. Arizona's going to, if Stroud's left or Richardson's left, they're going to sell that pick. And then somebody's going to go get him, because they know if they sit still, the Colts are going to get him. The Colts might have to jump up a spot if they want one of those 2 guys, or whoever's left of those 2 guys. If a second quarterback goes at 2, what you said, if the Texans stay, not probably picking a quarterback, they might, but I doubt it. And they'll probably pick Will Anderson. And at that point, it shakes up 3 and 4. And, if the Colts are equally comfortable with Stroud and Richardson, they can sit and get one of the 2. They don't need to give up any draft capital. So this is how the dynamics at the top of the draft play out, and it's why it's fascinating.
John for $5. Thank you, John. Does JMO's suspension affect the Lions draft strategy? I think it increases the odds they trade down with Tennessee. Oh, like we just mentioned, JSN, Van Ness, Mozzie, Campbell with first 4 picks. I mean, if they get those back to back to back, that would be kind of insane. I don't even know if that's possible, but that would be like an all-time top 4 haul.
Yeah,
they would to do it.
They would be loading up at that point. There is some variation of the world where that happens, but I don't actually think it affects their draft strategy up high. And I said this on Twitter earlier today. I think they will get speed in the mid rounds or down. Guy like Trey Palmer out of Nebraska, because what Jameson Williams not being there does to that offense. If you look at who's left, and Quintez Cephas is also gone, their deep speed just disappeared. Amon-Ra St. Brown's great. The rest of the guys are decent. They're starting NFL wideouts, but they do not have deep speed between Woods and Jones. So they may take a shot, but it's not going to be up high, because Williams is coming back after 6 games. It's a third of the season. He'll be back. Cephas gone, I think, for the year. I think he was one of the ones that was gone for the year.
So he got released.
At some point, you got to go get a guy that can stretch defenses. And if he can do that and just that for the first 6 weeks, and then grow into a 4th receiver role that Cephas was going to occupy, then that's worth a pick. And they may do it, but I don't think they'll do it up high. I don't think it changes anything up high.
Yeah. Just so people are aware, they Lions released Cephas and Moore, like after that came out. So like it's not he's not just not coming back in 2023. He's not coming back ever. So
Yeah, that's rugged. If you're not a star in the NFL, and I mean a top level, like top 10% star in the NFL, and you do something that's not great.
Also, it's just dumb. Like they watch Calvin Ridley get suspended.
I understand, but I'm just saying you have no protections as a middle to the bottom of NFL roster player, and I'm talking about lower 70%. Did you? You got a hole in your lip?
I'm an idiot.
Already? Okay.
Again, I'm the guy who had Stone Forsythe as a first round pick, so
that's okay.
I can't drink water.
We're all drooling at this point. Like I woke up yesterday and yeah, I was just like, my brain was completely shot, like stuffed. And I couldn't remember whether I had breakfast. Like I was at like 11 o'clock. I was like, did I eat breakfast? And I honestly couldn't tell you. And I was like, damn it. Okay. Later, in the middle of doing something else, I remembered, yes, peanut butter toast. I had a piece of peanut butter toast. I did eat breakfast.
Next question here. Fun Monophthalmos for 5 years. Thank you, Mono. Which teams are one bad draft away from melting down like the Colts and Cardinals did last year? Browns, Raiders, question mark. Ooh, let's see. What's a team that's really expensive, that has a lot of dead money, that can't afford to miss on the few picks they do have? Probably the Rams, but I don't think that we could even consider that a meltdown because last year was a meltdown.
Yeah, no, this is the planned fire sale for the Rams. The Rams fit the category in a way, but this is the storm that's been coming. And I'm looking at, I mean, Arizona's kind of already there. They're going through a massive change. They changed their GM, their coach. There's going to be a ton of roster turnover. There always is when a new GM comes in. Like 60% of that roster is going to move within the next 18 months. I'm trying to
What about the Giants? Because I think they were on a knife's edge last year where like they got every ounce of blood from that stone.
I would agree.
They need more talent, but if they don't hit on this class and they don't get that extra boost of talent they need in an NFC that I think, not that they're going to be anywhere near the AFC in terms of depth, but I think the NFC is going to be better this year than last year. I don't know if they can pull that off 2 seasons in a row because they were hitting every single green light.
Browns?
Yeah, I think the Browns have more talent.
There's a lot of talent there, but like a couple things to go wrong on that team. And, they went wrong last year. I could see it happening again.
Chat brought up Tampa, but I feel like Tampa made it very clear, like, we are going to go after Caleb Williams. Like, I think they have put that on everything except a billboard at this point.
It feels purposeful at this point. Any team that loses their quarterback, their top quarterback is susceptible to a pretty big drop. I'm thinking about like the Saints, right? If Derek Carr was to get hurt halfway through the season, like
Carr gets hurt, they're fucked.
Right. They could drop off pretty hard. There's a few.
It's hard to predict though, because like we both had the Colts being really good last year.
Yeah, we both thought Matt Ryan had gas left in the tank, and that was going to be the difference, is he was going to distribute to all the talent that Ballard had brought on, but then he didn't, and that talent went unleveraged, and they had a very middling year. I could see the same thing for I was just looking at them. Oh, Minnesota. Like Minnesota's got some really good top end talent, but again, if quarterback was to get hurt, they didn't have a backup plan for that. They have some stars, but they need to refill. If they do, they could take that division. If they don't, you're talking about that knife's edge. If they don't, they could be third.
Yeah. Find a cure for 224. Would you like to show the class your award? Yes. So
yes, do show your award, Brad. It's a major award.
Patrons sent me my Big Fish award, and it lives on my desk forever now. So it will always be here. Yes, for those of you that saw a very certain interview that I went through about a month ago, you'll understand that. But it's going to be on my desk forever, Kier. Trust me. Mad Tom for $10. Which of the top defensive players is your favorite fit for the Falcons? I'm personally hoping Tyree Wilson falls, but I also like Witherspoon and Gonzalez. I'd probably lean, even though they did get Okudah, because I don't see Tyree Wilson as a realistic option. Oh God, do I think Carter should go there?
I would say yes.
Do they have
Carter my thing is, would be really fun.
Yeah, it's just my thing is, do they have the leadership structure in place that I think Carter would thrive there?
Well, here's my two minds about that. Carter and Grady Jarrett would be super duper fun to watch on Sundays.
Yeah.
And Gonzalez versus all their receivers would be really fun to watch in practice.
Yeah. I would say, actually, you know what? Now that I'm looking at it, yes, Carter to Atlanta. And you know why?
Why?
You know who's in that room with him? And this is actually somebody who I said weeks ago. And I said, if you put Jalen Carter with a Calais Campbell type to guide him and mentor him, he could be something special. Calais Campbell's in Atlanta. So, yeah, sign me up for Carter to Atlanta. Like that Calais Campbell's one of the best leaders in the league at any position. Have him be a big brother to Carter, it'd be awesome.
Yeah, and that defensive line would be, I don't even want to say sneaky good. We're talking about Calais Campbell, who played well last year. He's, not what he was, but he's still really good. Onyemata, Grady Jarrett, they signed Bud Dupree. We'll see what they get out of him. You add a Jalen Carter to that rotation, like that's some heat in a division where they need to bring it. It's a very different looking line than they put out on the field last year. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, but the interior rush would just be nasty. Absolutely. And again, Ebiketie, like I was a huge fan of Ebiketie last year. Like, man, It'd be tough to block. Braden for $5. Thank you, Braden. Love my Falcons offseason, but I feel like the Okudah trade, speaking of Falcons, doesn't rule out CB at 8. CB room is injury prone and edge value isn't there unless Wilson falls. Kind of expanding on the last question, I agree with you that it doesn't rule it out. I think it was a hedge from them.
Yes.
I think they think that both Witherspoon and Gonzalez will be gone, which is why they did that move. I think they believe that they won't even get a chance. And at that point, again, if we're sticking with, let's say Tyree Wilson's a Seahawk, Will Anderson is a Texan, let's say Witherspoon and Gonzalez, in whatever order you want, go to Detroit and the Raiders. At that point, Carter is on the board at 8. And I think he's the next logical choice. So I think the Okudah trade was very intentional, and I think that was their way of signaling that, maybe they like Deonte Banks, but not in the top 10. And maybe they love the other guys, but they love them so much that they don't believe they're going to be there.
And that's the thing, is it's Falcons fans, that's not a terrible thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get Jalen Carter, that's a really good thing. And we just finished our cornerback rankings. They're one of the 3 that we published today on the Patreon site. It's ridiculous. The Falcons are going to be able to get a really good corner who can come in and challenge Okudah to start in the second, in the third. There is so much depth in this corner class that not picking one at your top pick is not anywhere near the death sentence it might be in other years. It's not even close.
Yeah, I mean, their pick in the, let's see, where do they pick in the second round? Atlanta, they're at 44. At least based on my rankings, I don't know if he'll be there. But like Corey Trice is there at 44, and we're packaging Jalen Carter with Corey Trice, and we're just sticking with Operation You're Not Allowed to Score Any Points, which is what they've been doing all offseason of like just building the most ridiculous defense they possibly can. Yeah, I'd be all about that. And the offense isn't even really devoid of talent either. Like, they still have Pitts, who I believe in. They have a decent receiving core. It seems like they believe in Ritter. The offensive line, at least on the right side, is elite. Drop my phone. On the left side, like they could just use depth. I don't know, man. The Falcons really aren't that far off to me.
No, they're in that building year where, again, if they have a good draft and the pieces that they got in the draft last year really start to gel, they could make a run. Their division is not a killer division. Like I don't want to say it's there for the taking, but it's certainly there for the competition. And they could compete. They could be one of those teams that is much better this year than last year.
Trice isn't good. All right, Hunter, this is your own personal Kenny McIntosh. Okay. I'm going to sell you on Trice. 6'3", 205-pound corner with incredible athleticism. I know Brent's, in terms of the jumps and the 3-cone and everything like that, he had like a historically good combine, but Trice has better long speed, just as good as a burst out of transitions, but he's got better feet. He's got fantastic hips, plays off, plays press. You can throw him at safety. Like EJ and I were talking about this. Like he could early on, just be your tight end eraser if you already have boundary corners you like. But the fact that he could be a starting boundary corner too and play in the slot and he's tough against the run. And I thought I was super high and obviously EJ was like, no, I don't think you're crazy. I like him too. But I checked in with a buddy of mine that has way more connections than I do. And I was like, am I crazy? And he said, no. Trice is the number 22 player in this draft that's not a quarterback. So he's going to go higher than you think. And that's why I'm thinking like 44 is a maybe that he's even on the board. Trust me, Corey Trice is good. And Julius Brents is good too. They're not that far off. But if I had to pick between the two, I'd say Corey Trice. I don't know. Did you end up with Trice over Brents for yourself? I think so.
Let me look. Too many rankings in my head. I did. They're in the same tier. So again, if you're familiar with our rankings, tier is more important than actual placement. Within a tier, we're talking about what we believe is similar value, if not similar skill set. And he's two-way. I've got Trice 5th and Brent 7th, separated by one player who I really like as well. But you could shuffle that order in terms of how they're picked, in terms of what the preference of the team they're going to is, or how they intend to use them. I wouldn't be shocked at all, but like he leads off my tier 3. So
Garrett for $10. What the hell are the Saints' plans, and what should we do at 29 and 40? I think the Saints' plans are that they never want to be an explicitly bad team. They will do anything and everything to avoid being bad. They're the NFC Steelers, where maybe they don't have the punch to handle the top tier in the conference, but as God is their witness, they will never be a bottom 5 team because they will move money around, they will do crazy stuff in free agency, and they will draft well enough. Like the Saints are actually a pretty good drafting team, but they, just like the Steelers, it feels like they are constantly fighting against the current, and they are just surviving from year to year rather than doing what a lot of really successful organizations that set up like dynasty type windows, where they tear it down and they get rid of bad contracts and then they come back fighting within 2 or 3 years. The Saints just don't want to do that. And it's not that they have to do that, but their margin for error consistently year over year is a lot smaller because they don't want to tear it down. So if we're just going to go with that Saints mindset of cap isn't real, we'll figure it out every single March, we'll do infinite void years on guys, and we'll just nail the draft. That's what they're always relying on, is we're going to nail the draft to get our cheap talent while we do weird shit in March. If we're going with that premise, looking at their roster, Michael Thomas, assuming he's coming back healthy-ish, I think he and Chris Olave are perfectly fine as a 1-2 duo. Now, which one's the 1 and which one's the 2, I'll let you decide. But I still think they could use even more receiver help. So Jordan Addison's in play, Quentin Johnston's in play, Flowers and JSN are going to be long gone. I would even say Josh Downs is in play. You could get a wild Josh Downs pick there as a slot guy for them. I would also say, offensive line is fine, but the depth could use some work. So if they want a guy who can kind of flex back and forth, maybe you could look at like a wild Matthew Bergeron pick at 29. Just get a guy who's super athletic and has interior and exterior versatility. I would say looking at the defensive side of the ball, like they're not going to go linebacker in the first round, but if they want to take another like just big ass edge rusher, which seems to be their type, they really love size at edge. That's about where you're going to look at. Let's see, maybe Keon White if he's still on the board. I could see Keon White looking good for them. There's a lot of different ways they can go. I'm trying to think, what would they do at 40?
Really, the ones where it gets deep into the 40s and the 50s and people are like, what are they going to do at,
I think it depends on what they do at 29.
Well, it depends on what they do at 3 and 17 to what they're going to do at 37. So we could lay out a theoretical, but if they take, say you're talking about, defensive end or edge or whatever, and they take that first, they're not likely going to double up on that high in the draft. So that means the other pick pivots. So you can say positionally, look, they can use some help on the defensive line and wide receiver. Whether they do that first and second or second and first is going to really depend on what's available on the board and how they have those players ranked, not necessarily how we have those players ranked. So we could say what we would do, what the Saints are going to do. They're not, if you're putting a scale up, they're not on the wild end of the scale of drafting, but I wouldn't say they're chalky either. They're somewhere in the middle. So, if they have a wide receiver they like that really slipped, great. If they think edge talent is the thing that's going to get them the best value at that top pick and somebody they just love slid, they'll do that. And then I'm with you that they could use some really good line depth. And if a player that they like either on the interior or a tackle slides, they could say, hey, that's a better value and we'll come back. We have a wide receiver. We have a couple of wide receivers. All teams do this. They have a horizontal board, right? So it's like in the first round, we think these guys will be there. If they're there, we stack them against the other positions that we think will be there in the round. As we go down, some of those guys will quote unquote float to the top. There will be guys that you thought were or drop to the bottom if you do it as a sort of horizontal and vertical board. And some of those guys you thought were going to be gone in the end of the first or the top of the second are still there in the top of the third. And you start, it starts to be a peak on your draft board. And you're like, okay, value dictates we were going to get this position here, but this guy that we had ranked as a late first, early second is still there in the top of the third. Do we do it now? Do we wait? Do we want to lose him? What do we have underneath him at that position that we think is a good fallback position? All that stuff comes in and they have to do it all in real time. It's very dynamic. But really what they do at the top kind of, sometimes takes whole columns out of that because they're like, we already got our help at blank. We're not going back until the later rounds. Like now we need to focus on the other positions we need.
I think they're another team that could potentially be a Mozzie Smith destination if they're just like, hey, let's just take a good player. Because inside right now they got Colin Saunders, Nathan Shepard, Malcolm Roach. Solid rotation, but I think Mozzie Smith in terms of like talent. Mozzie Smith could be DJ Reader, and DJ Reader's one of the best defensive players in the entire NFL. So I think if they're just going for let's just get a good player, I think Mozzie Smith could be a Saint. Also, I think corner just depends on how much you like Paulson Adebo. And so like they're another team where it's like, hey, they're potentially in the running for like Darius Rush, Corey Trice, Tyreek Stevenson, getting 6 years of contract control at a premium position for them, I think would be.
Well, I would say somewhere they're going to go corner. And a lot of people look at their starters and go, no, they're happy with them. Yeah, but there's so much depth at that position and there's not that much depth on their roster after those first two guys. They very likely are going to dip in and say, we're going to bolster that room because the draft is offering us such great depth. Won't be probably up high, I don't think. They're not looking for starter competition. I think they're happy with those guys. But third, fourth, fifth, sixth round down there, they're going to grab another corner that they think can compete at nickel or outside. They could use help with
both. Connor for 20. Thank you very much, Connor, once again. Two things. First, we finally finished grinding tape on the Discord today. About damn time. No, they got through more players than I did. I think they probably did
I was going to say
350.
I am not going to throw stones at that particular glass house.
Second for EJ, who are some of your favorite guys who are likely to go UDFA who we should keep an eye on? I have a couple, probably Johnny Buchanan from Delaware, the linebacker.
Yeah.
Probably going to go UDFA because he's 5'10", 220 as a linebacker from Delaware. Like that just doesn't sound like something who's going to get drafted. But I do have a draftable grade on him. Super fun player. Maybe it depends on how much you like Owen Papo from Auburn. I'm not a Papo guy. Like I have like a barely a draftable grade on him, but I think he has talent. He doesn't really know what he's doing yet. Looking at
which
edge
is concerning
players,
because he's been at Auburn for a long time.
I know. Looking at edge players, How do you feel about Viliami Fehoko from San Jose State? He's probably not going to be UDFA.
He's drafted 100%.
Carl Brooks, 300-pound stand-up edge from Bowling Green. That doesn't sound like something that gets drafted too often. But
a lot of production, tons of production. Pretty good Senior Bowl. He'll get drafted. That's the difficult thing, is saying who's not going to get drafted. I'll give you Tyjon Lindsey out of Oregon State. Super fast, really tiny receiver who started out at, I want to say, Oklahoma. I could be wrong about that. I'll have to look it up. But ended up at Oregon State, scored against good Pac-12 defenses. I saw him in person at the Oregon State Pro Day. Really, really fast, just short, but super strong too. Had good jumps. Only officially benched like 13, but I saw him put up like 18. They just didn't count 4 or 5 or 6 of them. Was really surprised by him. And then I went back to tape, and he has good tape. He's just little. But there's a lot of guys like that in this draft. So I think he'll get drafted, but with all the receivers and so many of his body type, it's possible he goes undrafted. Doesn't have a high profile. Some guys that are just going to get drafted lower. I'll try and get away from the UDFA thing because I'm kind of stumbling over that. Both corners from Oregon State, Rajon Wright and Austin. Like Austin, I like a little bit better. He'll get drafted, but it'll be lower because there's just so much talent, and he's a good corner. Like, I think he's a 3rd round corner in any other year. This year he might be a 5th or 6th round corner, just because there's so many guys that are talented in that spot. And then small school pass rushers, always small school pass rushers. There are guys that will get drafted late. People will take a chance on them because they're good athletes. We saw a bunch of them at the Shrine Bowl. Your guy from was it Eastern Michigan?
So Jose Ramirez from Eastern Michigan.
And then
BJ
Caleb
Thompson from Stephen F. Austin, Caleb Murphy from Ferris State.
Like, they'll all get drafted, but like it'll be
Murphy
late.
Might not. I don't know.
BJ might not. Ramirez, I think, probably will, based on the production. Some defensive line coach out there likes the tools in the production. And then Caleb Murphy, like I was really high on him leaving Shrine Bowl, and I didn't get any less high on his skills. I just looked at the rest of the edge depth in more detail when I got home and went, just like corner, oh my God, there's gobs of these guys in this draft. He might go in the 5th. He might go in the 6th, right? And he is a ridiculous talent at pass rusher. Yes, he played at a small school. So those guys are always interesting. And then the quarterbacks are always like, who's going to, again, it's at best going to be a practice squad guy, or if they get really good, a clip holder type. Like the Huntleys of the world very rarely get their chance. And when they do and they succeed, it's 1 in 100, 1 in 150 ish. But there are guys I like down the board in this class, like Jaron Hall from BYU. He's the same in my mind as Huntley was coming out, and he will sit somewhere and he might never get a shot. He might not stick in the league. I think he probably will. And if he does get a shot, I would love to see how it works out. I really like him. He's got good tape. He's got, I don't want to say great measurables because he's not tall, but he's great with his legs. He can create, got a better arm than you think. His accuracy is not bad. His decision-making is pretty good. He was careful with the ball. But nobody's talking about him because he's 6 foot tall, and he, is kind of a clone stat-wise of Jake Haener, who's another guy I like, but just has a lot of injuries on his resume. But guys like that, I'm always fascinated. That's why day 3 is such a thrill for me, is like, are they going to get drafted? Did they land in a good spot, which is key for those guys? Or do they get to pick their destination? Are they going to make it through training camp? I love those stories.
GC for $5. Thank you, GC. Would love Jonathan Mingo or A.T. Perry to the Browns. Any thoughts on what the Browns should do in this year's draft? So I would also love Mingo or A.T. Perry to the Browns because I think they need another big receiver. Here's the problem. I don't think either of those guys are getting 74, which is the first Browns pick. I would be very surprised if Mingo gets out of the 2nd round. I would also be surprised if A.T. Perry gets out of the 2nd round at this point. Both of them are 2 of the most talented, quote unquote, big prototypical X receivers in this class. If you want another big guy who might keyword might get to 74. Tillman from Tennessee? Maybe? You don't think he's getting there, EJ?
No way. I don't.
There's so many receivers.
I don't think he'll get out of the 50s to 70. No. Like, will he get to the second round? Yeah, almost certainly. He could be a surprise end of the first round pick because he, again, opposite a guy like Tyjon Lindsey, is one of the few guys with size who is good and has great tape and played outside and can occupy that traditional sort of size number 2 or even number 1, but not alpha role. There's not a ton of those guys. Mingo's one of them, which is one of the reasons. The other is his tape's good. But yeah. Tillman, somebody's going to bite before 70. Will they bite in the 50s? Probably. If he's there in the 60s, I would be really surprised. There's probably something we don't know if Tillman's there in the 60s.
I would say in terms of a receiver with at least a little bit of size that you might get in third round, who I think has a better chance of being there, Xavier Hutchinson from Iowa State is somebody you're looking at.
Oh, you know who I'd take?
Who?
If we're talking about the third?
Yeah.
Antoine Green.
Ooh, that would be intriguing.
I love Antoine Green. And
good ball skills, has
big
size,
play guy,
physical. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, he's good. If you're watching Drake May tape next year and you go back to this year and you see all the bombs, it's Antoine Green. But he's more than that too. He's a little bit like Jalen Hyatt light to me in this draft. Is that Jalen Hyatt's yards per catch is ridiculous. It's 19.2.
Yeah.
But Antoine Green's is 18.6.
Speaking of Hyatt, by the way, so I don't know, around like 11:30 last night, because I'm
so early.
I'm currently trying to figure out my stacks for the receivers because I finalized all my defensive rankings, and I'm finalizing my offensive rankings this week. I'm trying to get the offensive side done by Tuesday because there's more guys. And I was trying to parse out where exactly I want to stack Jalen Hyatt. And it's one of those where it's like I came away with like a similar feeling when I watched Tyler Scott and Hyatt, and I was like, I need to figure out the difference between these two guys.
Yep.
And so I watched Tyler Scott versus Temple just get the absolute shit beat out of him against press. It was like the most snaps he faced against press the entire year was in that game, and they beat him up, absolutely beat him up. Couldn't get off of it. And Jalen Hyatt has 36 snaps against press the entire year. And I was like, oh God. Okay. So let me watch all these. Watched every single rep against press that Hyatt took all year. And I was like, he's 180, but you wouldn't know it. Like he actually does have kind of a physicality to him when he's running against press, where he does this kind of like rip move through it. And I'm like, okay, he only has one way that he gets off of it because we've barely seen him do it. But it does work. And it worked against Georgia. It worked against Alabama. Mm-hmm. I was like, he's a one-trick pony, and he's 180, and he's in a weird fucking offense, and we have barely any tape of this one thing, but in the barely any tape of this one thing that we have, it actually worked. And I was like, I'm kind of coming around on Jalen Hyatt. It's not something that I expected this late in the process.
Welcome. No, I'm happy you found that. I was interested to see, and one of the things that may interest everybody that's watching is Brett and I don't talk about these. We talk about players all the time, and you might think that all these DMs and texts and everything we're sending back and forth late at night is like, where do you have this guy ranked? We don't talk about that at all.
No, we the first time I saw AJ's rankings was when he put them up.
With draft analysts about earmuffs, like people send me draft guides now, gratis. They're like, hey, I finished this, and it's everybody from little to really big, and they say, I just wanted you to have this, and I'm like, that's awesome. I'll read it after the draft, and I tell them very honestly, like, I'm not looking at that before the draft because it's impossible to get the visions of what people say and where they place people out of your head once you've seen it. So you have to be very focused, or at least I do, about not letting that stuff in. So Brett and I don't talk about that stuff. We talk about skills. We talk about what we like. We talk about some of the qualities that make them more impressive. There's a little bit of lobbying that goes on, especially when he'll say something early in the season that I like wildly disagree with. I'm like, I don't think you're seeing that clearly.
And a lot of it's because we watch different games.
That's right.
That's
and he'll say things to me about, oh man, you're missing it. If you think that's all that guy is, or you think he can't do that, like dig in a little more. And so we're good for each other that way in a balance, but we don't talk about where these guys are going to end up, to the point where he finished writing his half of the 3 that we released today, like last night. And I woke up this morning and looked at them and I was like, ooh, I'm just like you are. I'm like, where did he rank people? Because I don't know. But there are definitely players like Hyatt that I was on to a little bit earlier in terms of liking. And I did the same thing. I was like, okay, against like type players, and Scott's one of them, what's the difference? And I see a lot more things I like in Jalen Hyatt's game than in Scott's game. They have obvious similarities, but they also have obvious differences when you really dig in. So that, again, is a kind of thing that's a cluster buster, whatever you want to call it, that moves one guy up and one guy down in your rankings. So there's a lot of that goes on. And there's, in this year's class, there's, corner was impossible. I'm just glad to be done with it, quite frankly, because I could do it again tomorrow. It would be different. And it wouldn't be wrong. Right. There's just so
I
many
went like
players.
50 deep on DB. I was like, I can't watch any more DBs. I can't do it. It's too
right.
many.
And so wide receiver is, to a point, that way. It's not up high. There are very few guys up high in wide receiver, truly up high in wide receiver this year, but there's a ton of guys in the middle that have really similar skill sets. There's some big clusters that need differentiation, and that could be anything for you. It could be how they get off press, could be how they catch with their hands, could be whether or not they block, could be whether or not they have special teams experience, any combination of the above, right? Whether or not they perform well against big competition. Everybody's got a thing about a certain type of player that makes them like them more or less. But that's the real work of this. That's the hundreds of hours that you don't see when we finally release this one sheet and you go, you're wrong. Well, yeah, we might be. It's true, but we got there through process and work and comparison and everything else.
Ultra Hot Wings for $10. If the Jets pick an offensive tackle in the first, thank you, by the way, for the $10. If the Jets pick an OT in the first, does that mean Becton is on the trade block? If so, considering Okudah went for a 5th, could he be available for a 3rd to, say, the Eagles as Lane's heir? I don't think you get a 3rd from Mekhi Becton. I don't. I mean, Amari Cooper, who's a way more proven player, went for a 5th. You don't really have a lot of contract control left, because I think he's going into his last year. I don't think they picked up the option, right? So I think he's going into year 4.
Yeah.
So a 1-year tackle who wouldn't even start for the Eagles anyway. They're not spending a 3rd round pick on that. If they really want a project to groom as Lane's heir in the 3rd round, they'll probably just take Blake Freeland from BYU and say, go fix him, Jeff Stoutland. Like that's what they would do. So if the Jets pick tackle in the first, yes, it probably means Becton's on the trade block. No, they're not getting a 3rd. They'd probably get a 6 or a 7, like a 7 that could be a conditional 6th based on playtime is my guess. Like no way are they getting a day 2 pick for him. Not now.
No, it won't be day 2. I mean, some team, again, depending on how their draft strategy goes, and maybe, they've got something else going on with their tackle. They get a training injury or something, and people get desperate. I would say 5 would be close to desperate at this point. 6, probably likely, just given pedigree. And, he wasn't a bad player coming out. Somebody's had good grades on him in the NFL sphere. And somebody's going to think he's salvageable as long as he's healthy. And if he is, yeah, somebody will toss a pick, but they're not going to overpay. There's no reason to. There's not going to be a bidding war. It would have to be the right spot, and that starts to limit teams that he could reasonably go to pretty quickly.
Nick for $2. Thank you, Nick. Where would Bo Callahan rank in this QB class? Well, I don't know. What's his S2?
Yeah, right. Do you have his S2 scores? Oh my goodness. Great question though, Nick. Yeah, I see that little piece of paper all the time, right? And it's named from this draft class, no matter what.
No matter what.
On the sticky. And
Carl Brooks, no matter what.
Oh boy, I don't know about that, but yeah, it's interesting. There's so many pieces of how all of this intersects, who they're getting, who's available, who wants in, who wants out, who the new coaching staff likes, doesn't like. You hear all that stuff, and what we try and do is distill that down to a picture that makes some kind of reasonable sense that would lead us in a direction to say, look, I think they need, and some teams would tell us flat out, if they're being honest, we don't think we need that. And we would say, we disagree with that. Like, we see what's on your roster and we know you love those guys, but I think you might love them too much. And it's just, there's so many layers of human analysis and human interaction here around the draft that makes accurately predicting impossible, but it makes it fascinating. And the first round is going to be a lot of fun. We will already, at this point next week, which is weird to say, we'll be done with the first round. We'll be talking about who's left as a surprise at the top of the second round, or who went at 20 that we didn't expect. And a lot of these questions will be getting answered really rapidly, but it is a fascinating process because there's so much variance.
Yeah. And I mean, we're not news guys, so we're not in the business of reporting things, but God, we've heard some interesting.
I got you last week. I couldn't wait. Somebody told me that, and I was like, I can't wait to share this with Brett because I want to see the look on his face. If it's a Texans rumor and I know how he feels about the player, I save those. And I was like, I'm just going to tell you this because I got like 5 players that the Texans supposedly are very interested in. And there was one I knew, like 3 were chalk. One was like, okay, I didn't see that, but I could see it. And one was like, oh my God, I'm going to tell Brett right now. And it's,
we'll see.
You hear stuff like that all the time. Like I said, I've heard a lot of stuff about the Lions, but some of it, occasionally you hear stuff about a team, and I know this happens to you because you've sent me some of the texts where you're like, what? And it just seems out of left field. And you wonder if that's like pure smoke, them just muddying the waters, or if there really is something going on there that based on their roster, you just can't see. You're like, why would they do that? A team that seems very set at a certain position and they have an extremely high grade on, someone at that position, and somebody says they're going to take them in the top 10 or 15. And you're like, but they've already got like, what are we not seeing here? Like, do they not like that guy? Are they worried about a suspension? Because sometimes that stuff's coming, right? You don't know. But
and sometimes it's, they already have this though, and then that person that they had is traded away on draft night, and we're like, oh, okay.
Makes perfect sense now. I didn't have that piece of information, but now that I do, and that's one we haven't talked about hardly at all because we've been so focused, and rightfully so, on all the prospects. Is there's I think PFF put out an article the other day about 5 players who are very likely to be moved or very possible to be moved on draft day, and it included Eckler, and I had totally forgotten about the whole Austin Eckler bubble up that happened 6 weeks ago because it's been displaced in my brain with all this other information. But I was like, oh, there's a really good NFL football player that's not super happy with his contract and could very much change the landscape. He is a change the landscape type player. If they don't have that skill set in their RB room and he shows up there, like, your outlook for that team might change a little bit. And those are fascinating. We've got tackles, Jonah Williams. We've got running backs like Austin Eckler. D-Hop's floating out there in the wind. He'll end up somewhere, and that's obviously an impact player. So that's a whole nother fascinating element to the draft that we've talked very, very little about.
Yeah. For what it's worth, D-Hop, I expect that to happen during the draft. I think teams are waiting to see who's on the board at certain picks.
Yeah, and the Rodgers thing will probably happen. If it's going to happen, it'll happen during the draft. I'll just go on record as saying I think everybody will be very surprised by the compensation.
I think no matter what, we'll be
surprised. Did EJ just release Bijan to the Lions at 6? No, he didn't. EJ,
I haven't heard anything about.
Is not an insider. Yeah. And what you're hearing right now, like, not an insider by choice. Don't want to be. Think that's a terrible job. Like, all credit to the people that do it and do it well. Not a career path I'm interested in at all. Like, I would rather go live in a cabin in the woods by myself than be an NFL insider. Not a great business for me. You're hearing a lot of Bijan. Bijan popped up for the Bears today. There was a rumor like, oh, Bijan of the Bears. He's in play. look, he's a top player in the draft. He's in play for everybody. Are they going to prioritize him? I don't think so. If anybody gets him, is he automatically probably if it's up high, we've talked about this. If he's picked in the top 10, he's like one of the top paid running backs in the NFL, not rookie running backs. He just by rookie wage scale and where running back is currently valued positionally, he becomes one of the top running backs paid in the NFL without ever having played it down. He might be worth that, but that's a huge gamble for any team that might do it. But, everybody's in play. Is anybody going to prioritize him? We'll see. Is he going to go in the first round? I think he is, because he's a really, really good player, and he's good in all areas. He's a good pass blocker. He's a great runner. He's a great receiver. Like, that's the kind of player you need in the modern NFL. He fits. But you're hearing him linked to just everybody at this point. It's just spam with a week to go. Like, oh, they might get Bijan. Well, everybody might get Bijan. Who's going to get Bijan? We'll see.
Sensei for $20, or Slensei for $20. Thank you, Slensei. I overheard an interview. I honestly forget where, but it was about the process of grading these prospects. How do you go about grading prospects, and how many first-round grades do you realistically see in the draft? In terms of how I go about grading prospects, I did a lot different this year than I have in the past, because we had more resources available to us than we've ever had in the past. EJ and I, we have all 22 access, more than we've had before. So we can dive deeper on guys. We have more availability, more of it, not as much as team, nowhere near as much as teams, but like we have more ability to gather off-field information about guys, to a degree, medical information about guys. Again, nowhere near teams. So like there's going to be a lot of stuff that we're very surprised by that we haven't heard about, but we've gotten more of it this year than we have in the past. And I just think as we grow in this business and we get more resources and more access to information, and honestly, the Discord's been a tremendous help, because they're constantly just throwing names out there. And I was like, okay, I'm going to write that down and get to that later. Like, they've been awesome for just giving me a list of players to look at. So shout out to everybody in the Discord going through 350 names, which I think I got to 270. So they still did way more than I did. But just having more resources than we've ever had, having more information than we've ever had, I definitely had to change my own personal process, because I could go deeper, and therefore I did go deeper. And so I feel like in the past, I maybe have done more names before, but I haven't been as confident about the work that I've done as I am this year, because I got to watch more guys and watch them more thoroughly and do off-field checks on ones that I kind of had questions about and stuff like that. So I feel more again, I'm shooting for 50% here. Like that's the best case scenario, is like half right. But I feel more confident about my ability to be half right this year than at any point in the past. I don't know about you, EJ.
Big shift for me this year as well, for all the reasons you mentioned, but a shift in a different direction. In years past, I've really obsessed and gone into great detail on everybody. And that led me to a lot of guys in UDFA. Connor, shout out to Connor, asked about that earlier in this particular stream. And it's a lot of fun, but I had to go back and look at what that really meant. And what it really meant for all that work, for the extra 150 or sometimes 200 guys I did, is that I knew about 5 guys mid-season that might get a start. Mm-hmm. And you have to decide what that's worth. And to me, I said, oh, man, with everything else that you're doing, that's not a return on investment. And it hurts. I don't like giving up that piece, because it's fascinating. And I love those diamonds in the rough that I didn't get to spend as much time on them. I didn't go chasing rabbit holes at, Cal, Poly, Ag, and Tech that I used to. And that was just something I did. The other thing I did is all the information that I used to fill out, I had access to that information now through other sources. So I didn't have to recreate it. I used to recreate all that: height, weight, combine measurements, full write-ups, links to combine. Like I would make these really fully featured profiles. And I was like, how much of that did you actually use either during the draft live stream, which is the product that we make out of this, or throughout the season? How many times did you go back to that table and say, oh, I want to look at all that information that I assembled? And the answer was shocking? The answer was disappointing. The answer was I was doing it just to do it, right? To have it. It made me feel like I was much more dialed in about this, and it really wasn't. And I didn't use a lot of it, more than once.
Also,
right?
If we really want that information, you just go to Alex Katzen's
Katzen's
Google sheet.
Katzen needs a huge shout out for this. Alex Katzen, our buddy who lives really close to me here, and I've paid him back in meals. He has a Patreon. Go check it out. If you use his sheets, absolutely buy. It says buy Alex a beer. Do that. Great guy, certainly deserves it. But like so many people in the industry, not just us, college recruiters, NFL teams, folks at All-Star games, folks like ourselves use his information. And it meant between his combine sheet and his pro day sheet that I didn't need to recreate all that stuff. I could just look it up. I've got them open right here, right now. I haven't had them closed for months because I use them every day, multiple times. But I went back to like, what do I need to effectively communicate to you all about these players? Like, what do I need to distill it down to? Because all that stuff, like you never saw that stuff, right? I would pull out nuggets from it, and maybe that's why you watch the coverage, but like, the vast majority of that stuff, I would say like 70-75% of that stuff I never used more than once. And I was like, okay, you got to cut it down. You got to, in order to get through more. So it feels a little bit more surface to me this year, but it also feels like right sized. It's like that gives me the essence of the player that I can help communicate to everybody that might ask, whether that's on a podcast, radio spot, during the live stream, in our draft or our season preview shows during the summer, or when we're doing live streams and, you know, in week 16, this guy gets a start. I can go back to what I've created, that pared down version, and feel like I have a handle on where they started. And then I can go look at what they've done again with the all 22 access in the league so far, maybe some training camp footage, and feel like, okay, I know what I'm talking about with this guy. I know where he's at, and we've got a handle on him. And that feels right size, but it's been a massive shift for me. My materials this year are very, very different than they've been in years past. And I feel both like more certain in some ways about that, and like also just change is scary. So I'm like, but where's all my stuff?
Yeah. It's like, how much do you really need?
How much do you really need? And again, to create the product you're looking to create, because the whole point about me learning about all these players, yeah, there's personal gratification in that, but it really is to communicate to all of you. And I have to think about what it is I want to communicate. What's meaningful? What will you remember? What helps you understand this game, this league, you know, this transition better? And that was my keystone. I should have, should have had that on my sticky note, good information or good communication, no matter what. And that was the thing, is when I was diving down rabbit holes, I would like hold that up and go, is this going to help?
Yeah.
Nah, okay.
Or does it bog me down? Does it keep me from getting to the next guy?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
As for how many first round grades do you realistically see in the draft? I think I ended up with like 24 or 25.
Yeah. Not as many as there are picks almost any year, not as many as there are picks. But again, that doesn't matter. And we could have a whole different stream talking about the draft and what's real in the draft. Grades don't matter, right? Again, teams have horizontal boards, they have vertical boards, and they have needs. And they don't always draft for needs, but there's only so many sources to get players. And if you've been through most of free agency, which they have, and you haven't filled a hole, and you're going into next season, and it's important, you're getting it in the draft.
Yeah.
Right. You're 99% of the time you're getting in the draft. You might trade for it. One of those few, like 5 guys that might move on draft day in a trade, or right after in training camp, another 10, 15 guys might move. That's the whole league. Out of 1,800-ish players, you're talking about 8 guys might move and trade. All the rest of it's coming through the draft. And you only have these players to pick, and you have to pick them this year. So like what round grade they have them on is they need one. Right. And if they don't get this guy, they're going to this guy, and it's the next tier, the next cluster, whatever. So like I chafe a little bit when people are like, that guy's a 5th rounder. Like, for who? Right. Maybe it's not rounder. It's that, he stacks in my, like we do it, 3rd tier of wide receivers. If he's still available, and you're in the 5th or 6th round, and all the guys around him have been picked, you might want to do a little quick background on him and figure out why. But, go grab him. You thought highly of him.
Leo Snell for $10. Thank you, Leo. Can you guys thought experiment moving Julius Brents to the slot? I get his size profile says outside, but I think his movement profile would make him compete as one of the best slots in the league. Now, looking at my own personal kind of blurb that I wrote for Brent's, he's a tier 3 DB for me. So I said, big press corner that lacks long speed, has weirdly loose hips for someone his size, just doesn't have the third gear to recover 25 plus yards down the field if beat badly, which again is something you need to have if you're going to survive outside. Luckily, he doesn't get beat badly often. Only real technical flaw to me is he punches high on his jams, and he tips it early, so it's a dead giveaway when he's shooting that inside hand, but that's coachable. Love his potential. Could be really interesting matchup weapon for teams who need a big DB to match up with oversized slots or tight ends. And then from there, he can grow into a true outside corner when he refines his press technique a bit more. So all that to say is, yeah, when I did my blurb with Julius Brents, that was my exact thought was, is he ready to play outside right now? Probably not. But if you just want to get him on the field against the Michael Pittmans of the world, these big power slots, he's probably the guy that you want to use for that in terms of, day 2 DBs that you're going to get in like the late second to mid third round. Like that's what Julius Brents would do for you.
Yeah, or the Mike Gesicki's of the world, because Mike Gesicki is a slot receiver, right? People call him a tight end. That's fine. He doesn't do a lot of blocking, but he does do a lot of receiving from the slot, both tight and from wider slot alignments. You need a guy. If your slot corner is 5'8" or 5'9", and they're lining up against Gesicki or, you said Pittman, CD lines up in the slot a ton. CD's not a small guy or short guy. You need some size there, but they have to be able to move too. And Brent fits both of those categories. He is a big guy with long arms, but like you said, weirdly loose or can flip his hips very, very well in the short areas. So against guys that are, unicorns in that they're 6'3" or 6'4" and they're blazing fast, yeah, he's going to have a liability on the deepest part of that route, the deepest third. But for everybody else, he's going to be a really good matchup because more and more big, tall, strong players are ending up in the slot, and running out guys that are 5'9", 185 can be really difficult depending on their skill level.
Riley Turner for $10. Thank you, Riley. Appreciate you in more ways than one, and you know why. Gents, the patron draft guide is set to release within the next 24 to 48 hours. Again, everybody, the patrons coming together to watch an absolutely abnormal amount of players with all 22 for all of them. Brett, you were so right about Dorian Williams. Absolutely awesome to watch. Who does he remind you of the most? He's not JOK, but he's got some similar stuff to him to me as a coverage linebacker in terms of getting depth, his feet, his hips, his explosion in space. From a coverage perspective, he does a lot of things that look very similar to JOK, and he has a very similar build to JOK too. Now, JOK was better against the run coming out. That's why he was my LB1 that year. But I do feel like when you see him like slashing on run blitzes and how he knifes into the backfield and everything like that, from a movement perspective, it's pretty similar. JOK was better at diagnosing and getting off blocks, even as small as he was, and that's something Dorian's going to have to work on. He gets swallowed up by bigger body offensive linemen. In fact, I don't necessarily like him as a run defender unless he's kept clean by, I don't know, Mozzie Smith, right? Like
Giants,
Giants, right? But for every other aspect of JOK's game, I think Dorian Williams he has a lot of the same skill set there. This is again very similar to me, but like Kenny McIntosh and Alvin Kamara. I'm not saying he is. I'm saying
breaking
similar in that one.
Breaking. Brett Coleman thinks Dorian Williams is JOK's equal. Yeah, you're gonna hear about it. No, Dorian was a guy I got to a little bit sooner than Brent did, and I sent it to him and said, "Hey," and he was like, "No, I don't think so." And I was like, "Watch him." And then it was like the next day you put up a tweet and got dinged by a certain professional in the business who was like, "Well, you would have known earlier if blah, 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 blah." But when you do,
I'll say it was Jim Nagy who was like, "Well, if you come to Senior Bowl, you would have seen Dorian Williams." And I'm like, "Well, Jim, go talk to the NFL and tell them to not make Shrine Bowl and Senior Bowl in the same fucking day."
Get these separate. No,
I
and
can drive
you
to
know he's
Vegas in
right.
4 hours. I can't get to Mobile, Alabama in 4 hours.
Yeah, and it's not a shot at that. That structure is maddening to us. We
It's
would
not
love to
Jim's
have them
fault, but it's like I
separate.
can only go to one.
And the other thing is there's amount of time here, right? If you're talking about 125 players in the Senior Bowl and 125 players in the Shrine Bowl, that's 250 players. I'll tell you what, in the last week of January, I am not going to be through 250 players in depth because I cover the NFL for a living and I'm still doing it at that point. The season's not even over with. We recorded our conference championship previews from Las Vegas. It's double duty at that point. I can skim 100 guys. I can't skim 250 guys at the end of January. It's not going to happen. So there are going to be guys that everybody gets to later in the process. I don't care who you are. And you're going to find some guy. I guarantee I'll find a guy between now and the draft because I still have a third tier of players that I'm looking through that people have sent me. And some of those are sleepers and some of those are just people I haven't gotten to as much. But I'm going to find somebody. I always do. It's like Tuesday before the draft. And I'm like, holy crap. Why did I not watch this guy with more than a cursory glance or something when I go back to him? So it's the way of the world. You're talking about hundreds of players, thousands and thousands of plays, hundreds and hundreds of hours worth of study. There's going to be somebody that slips through the cracks that you watched once or, didn't have a great feeling about or just didn't watch. It's going to happen.
The Lions, I can't remember what reporter put this out. The Lions draft board started at 1,100 grades, and they narrowed it down to 170. Yeah. So the Lions don't even have 250 draftable players in this class, or 266, whatever. They have 170. So if all those 170 are off the board, guess who's trading out of the 7th round? Lions.
Or just taking an athlete, right, for special teams, for depth, for camp body, whatever. Take a third arm, pick a kicker if your kicker's getting old, bring him in for a camp leg. You do that stuff sometimes. But team fit is really, really important. And that's why there's only 170. It's not, they don't think there's not more than 170 good players. It's not more than 170 good players at their positions of need that fit in their contract cycle and their scheme. And you put all those filters over it and you shake it out and you get probably 155 and then another 15 guys that Dan Campbell just likes the cut of their jib. So
Mike Mazzeo for 732. Thank you, Mike. First time, long time. How would you rank the upsides of Cedric Tillman, Rashee Rice, which Wilson?
Michael.
Michael. Okay, Stanford. Michael Wilson and Mingo from Ole Miss, right? Yeah, Jonathan Mingo from Ole Miss. Giants fan seeking not first/second round weapons. Bootleg for life. Thank you, Mike. Well, I will say, so Peter Schrager put out his mock draft. He had Mingo going in the first round. So he's starting to
I think that's actually a very strong possibility. The whole AJ Brown halo from last season, not just the Super Bowl, but last season, AJ Brown sort of being unleashed in a different way than he had mostly previously in his career. He certainly had highlights in Tennessee, but a little bit different. If I'm going purely upside, which is the question for those four, I would say Mingo, Tillman, Wilson, Rice.
That's the exact order I would go as well. Yeah.
With a small break between Tillman and Wilson and a pretty big break between Wilson and Rice for upside. I'm not saying Rashee Rice is not a good football player. I'm saying I'm not sure there's a lot of untapped potential that we haven't seen from Rashee Rice. There's some from Michael Wilson. Saw a lot of his good stuff on tape. What he did at the Senior Bowl, a lot of that was on tape at Stanford.
It's just
Mingo had this weird jump between last year with Corral on that offense and then this year when he was featured. And they used him differently. They just purely used him differently. They used him on 2.5 routes last year or year before last. And that was all they used him on. And he was good. He was productive, but he was third or fourth wide receiver for them. This year, they used him everywhere. They moved him to all the receiver slots. They used him in the backfield, jet sweeps, short stuff, crossing routes, deep stuff, breaking stuff across the middle of the field. And he literally exploded. And I don't think he's done. He's had 1 year of that. physically, he's super interesting. That's why I would put him at the top of that potential list.
Yeah, I go the exact same order. Wilson, good player. I just the durability just scares the shit out of me, or rather, lack of durability.
Yeah.
Mingo size speed profile is rare in this class. It's rare. And Tillman, I just we talked about it in the Shadow Sleepers episode. He's been flying under the radar. I think because when your teammate wins the Bolitnikov and you got a quarterback who's getting a whole bunch of first round buzz and you got a backup quarterback who can throw it 70 yards. Like, yeah, you kind of just fall into the background. But Tillman's a really good player, very good player. Again, I don't think he's going day one, but I'd be absolutely very few things would surprise me more than Tillman getting out of day two.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say that. Let me get to scroll. Trying to get to the next question here. There we go. Daniel Trump for $10. I'm not sure if that name is real, but thank you, Daniel, for your $10. What right tackle will the Bears end up with? Will they pick one at 9, 53, 61, 64? Is there depth to get a good one other than at 9? I'm worried. Thanks. I will say, yes, there's depth. Is there enough depth to get to 53 to get the one you want? That's where I'm kind of like, I don't know about that. If you're going to take one, I would say don't screw around. Do it at 9. Whether it's Skoronski, whether it's Paris Johnson, whoever. Don't screw around. Just do it at 9. Because in the first 10 to 12 picks of the second round, there could be a pretty significant run on that position. So I wouldn't mess with it. I wouldn't put yourself in a position where you have to give up some of the assets you've accumulated just to go back up to get one when you could have potentially taken the best one in this class at 9 anyway. Like, you can get edge rushers in the second round. You can get receivers in the second round. You can get corners in the second round. They don't need a corner, but there's a lot of shit you can get down there. You're not getting Skoronski or Paris Johnson. So I think they will go tackle at 9. I just don't know which one.
I don't think so. Not because they don't need one. Let's put that out there first. The need is there, I think. But a couple of things. I think ideally they would like to trade back from 9 and pick one of the ones they want and feel better about the value and pick up some other picks. Like, I would love to see them trade back, pick Darnell Wright in the middle of the first round, wherever they traded back to. And I think everybody wins in that scenario. So it might not be at 9. It might be wherever they trade down to if that occurs. And then there's this thing with Poles where he's a former offensive lineman himself. He has a very particular type. He wants big guys that are super athletic. They don't necessarily have to be super hefty, but they need to be tall and long, and they need to be really athletic. Like, we're starting to develop the pace profile, and the pace profile is not necessarily highly drafted, but tall, really long levers, and really athletic. And he knows he can get some of those guys later. And if you look at their 30 visits and you look at some of the guys they talk to outside of those, like, he and the scouts have been chumming the waters for 6th, 7th round and UDFA tackles from all over the place. Guards too. There's one guy that I would say is sort of that 2nd to 3rd round range, that I'd be really interested in. I just went back and watched his tape again, either yesterday or day before. And then I reached out to Brandon Thorne, who's one of our guests in our draft series, and Brandon's opinion and eye on offensive line I respect greatly. And I said, what do you think? Like, what do you think of Nick Saldivari? Like, do you think he's a tackle or a guard? And just give me your blurb, basically. Because I have my opinion about that. And he said, I think he could do either, but I think he deserves a shot to play tackle. I said, okay, we're the same on that. And I told him one of my favorite things about Saldivari is, like, he plays with great patience in pass pro.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you never see him overcommit, lunge, do the wrong thing. Like I said, it looks like pass blocking AI in somebody's body. Like, he just reacts perfectly to whatever somebody does, right? If they're going to punch and knock their hands down, drop on top of them. If they're going to be a little bit late, he's going to step forward, short side him, stab him in the shoulder. Like, and he just always has the right answer, but you never see him overcommit. And there was actually a rep where he didn't touch a guy for like 2.2 seconds.
Yeah, because you're waiting.
And
let
he would.
let
And
him
this
throw
guy
the
was
move.
like, this guy gave him every feint, the shoulder dip, the hand, whatever. And he was like, no, it's not real. It's not real. It's not real. It's not real. Like, come at me with something real. And as soon as he did, he had it, right? He had that guy. He had his shoulder down. He twisted him. He landed on top of him. But for like 2 seconds, he just mirrored him, didn't touch him. He's like, I'm in my spot. You're doing all these things. I'm not, it's like when you used to play basketball when you were a little kid and you went for all the ball fakes and your coach finally said, don't watch their head. Don't watch their hands. Don't watch their feet. Watch their hips.
Yeah.
Their hips have to go whichever way their body's going to go. They can't fake you with their hips. So watch their hips. And when their hips move, you move. Before that, don't move, right? And I love Saldivary's processor. Like, he's going to go later. He's not. It's going to be at best probably high third.
Yeah, I don't think he's going second.
Right. At best, probably high third. So could you use one of the many picks? The Bears have a cluster of 3 picks, late 50s, early 60s, to grab a Nick Saldivari and say, hey, we really like, that. So that's possible too, just given Poles' approach. He scattershot at O-line in the late rounds last year. I think everybody's really focused on tackle. If you look at all the mock drafts and everything else, everybody's like, get to tackle first. It's usually Paris Johnson Jr. It's usually at 9. Like, that could happen. Absolutely. But like, if Jalen Carter's there at 9, they're probably going to pick Jalen Carter, and then they're going to figure out tackle later on down, and they might have to do somebody like
which is a big if, right?
Sure.
If Carter's not there, I don't know. I get maybe
it'll be fast. And again, it depends on who's there and who wants. If anybody wants to move up, takes 2 to trade. Yeah, I think he would be more than willing to trade back into the middle half of the first round and go get a guy like Darnell Wright and just be happy at that point because he got his picks and the guy he wanted.
FBS Gandhi for $5. Thank you, Gandhi. Generally, how do you evaluate players? You're almost always positive about guys on bootleg or on film room, and then say something like he'll probably go in the 6th. Yes, you're correct.
On both counts.
Part of that is born from as I meet more of these prospects and their subscribers and their fans, and they watch the content, I want to be cognizant of the fact that we've now been doing this long enough that like these kids that are going to the NFL have been watching us since high school. And it would absolutely kill me if, unbeknownst to me, I am only talking negatively about a guy who is going to the NFL. Objectively, that makes you top 1% of the top 1%, right? You're one of the best football players on planet Earth if you're even in the discussion to get drafted. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that I don't want to just be listing the negative qualities of a young kid who is probably watching and who's already a good football player, as proven by the fact they're going to the NFL. That being said, I also my philosophy is I don't necessarily care as much about what you can't do. I care more about what you can do, and I trust that NFL coaching staffs will put you in a position where you're only doing what you can do. And I go back and I watch some videos that I put out. Like I was really harsh on Zach Pickens, and I kind of felt bad about it because I really went in on him on run defense because he got his ass kicked against like Arkansas and pretty much every other SEC defensive line. Like he couldn't anchor against the run, and I feel bad about that because I'm like, God, what if like Zach Pickens' cousin is watching this, because we get DMs every single year of like, so-and-so is my family member. Like I grew up with that. Like I feel bad about that. If like somebody's looking for something about their family member and it's like, I can't stop the run to save his fucking life. And I'm like, I feel like an asshole. And I want to focus more on the fact that Zach Pickens could really rush the passer. He's a great penetrator, great athlete, all that kind of stuff. And so for a lot of these guys, I want to focus on what they can do. And when I say he'll probably go in the 6th, that's me saying he's not a complete player. Because if he was a complete player, he'd be going a lot higher in the 6th. And so usually when I'm describing what they can do and their skill set and everything like that, that's me saying like, this is what their skill set is. This is what their role is. And when I say they're going in the 6th round, it's because that's the value of that skill set and role. If somebody can stop the run and rush the passer and they're 6'2", 330, guess what? They're going in the 1st round. if it's Yasir Abdullah, who's 6 foot 235 and is a great athlete and rushes the passer and covers well and everything like that, and I say, but he's probably going in the 5th, it's because that's my way of saying there's a lot of teams in the NFL that don't use a Sam linebacker like Yasir Abdullah. And so he's going in the 5th because there's less teams that need that. Doesn't mean he's not a good player. Doesn't mean I don't love him. But I'm not going to focus on he's small and not a system fit for everybody, because that's implied when I say he's going in the 5th round. I don't know. Basically, I try not to be a dick to 20-year-olds that are achieving their life dream. That's what I'm trying to say.
There's 3 things on this one. They're in a little bit different order than yours, but they all figure in. The first one is we don't fucking know.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The place we need to start from as analysts and getting better at this is saying we don't have any freaking idea. We are learning. We have a lot of experience and we can say what we think. We talked about this with JT O'Sullivan. That pod's coming out either later today or early tomorrow. And one of my favorite things about JT's content is he'll say, I don't know what the read is here. I don't know how this guy was coached to go through this progression. I would do it this way, but he might have been told under no circumstances do it that way. So I don't know. And it's like that with a lot of these players. We talk about offensive line technique. We talk about different offenses that look different than NFL offenses. We're not sure how they're going to translate, but we're not really sure. We're not in that room. We don't know. We don't know most of these guys. We are lucky enough to meet a handful of them, and that's awesome. It's way, way better than not meeting any of them. We learned so much from that. But we don't know about these guys, about their coaching, about their progression. We just have tape, and we can say what we see on tape, and we're going to be wrong a lot. It's part of the job. It's part of everybody's job. GM hit rate in the high 30s is really good. You're saying 50%? Like, go for it, man. Like, if we hit anywhere near 50%, we're doing great. So the first thing is we don't know. And if we come from that place of uncertainty and not saying, this guy sucks, he'll never do X, we're going to be better off as analysts. The second part is, yeah, we sit with these guys now and they've seen the content. And if we're like, man, that guy can't block to save his life, and then you have to sit across the table from him, he's 330 pounds, a little bit different, right? Makes you think very differently about, and it's not just him. You see his family in the stands at the Shrine Bowl, and they're all cheering, and they all watched it too. And they know who you are. And they're like, yeah, I saw you crapping on my son. Right. So there's that. And being careful about that, because again, these guys are all top athletes. And then there's the piece that is, we do try and be positive, right? Because it's a scouting philosophy. It's about, tell me what you can do, right? Those are the things that are going to get you drafted. Your positive traits. It's the reason people are looking at you. It's the reason that you're on this list or invited to that game or anything else. We want to tell you about those things. But on the flip side, we're going to be realistic about the transition between college and the pros, because that's our job. Right. And a lot of people don't understand that. Right. College fans do not understand why the guy that starred at their institution and was all league is going to go in the 5th, because he had one skill set that the coach just hammered home, and in their league it worked, and in the NFL it ain't gonna work, and he doesn't have a second pitch, right? He's just gonna get stoned by a guy that's bigger and faster and stronger than him for the first time in his whole life, and he's gonna flounder. Yeah. And we see that because we know how the game's gonna work, but we're not gonna tell you like he's not gonna be able to adjust. We're gonna say he does this thing really well. It's why everybody cares about him. That skill's worth this in the NFL. And if he wants to be better than that, good on him. We hope he gets there, but he's going to have to adjust and do things he hasn't done in college. And we haven't seen that, so we can't say it's there. So his value right now, at this point, the snapshot of going to the league is here. So everything that is true, and there's reasons behind all of it.
JJ for $5. Thank you, JJ. Who is someone you have a much higher grade on than most people? I recorded my mock yesterday and had Parker Washington at pick 31. He's my 4th wide receiver. First of all, a lot of Parker Washington fans. Catches everything. Very good slot receiver. I think Sterling Shepard was kind of like my general, which again, if you're drafting Sterling Shepard, like there's worse things to spend a 1st round pick on. So or Christian Kirk is a comp for him that some people have as well. Again, worse things to spend a first round pick on than that. So somebody who I'm much higher on than most people. That's a good one.
I got a bunch if you need to look.
Nick Hampton, I guess that counts. He's a tier 3 edge for me, somebody who I think could potentially come off the board late day 2. A lot of people think he's a late day 3 guy. I think he's incredibly athletic. 6'2", 240. I find the Nick Hampton conversation fascinating because it's Nolan Smith is going to go in the top 15 and he's 240 pounds and jumps 39 inches or whatever it was and super bendy, super bursty. Nick Hampton, 240 pounds, super bursty, super bendy, borderline UDFA. What's going on here? They're not that far off. So, I get it. Nolan Smith's way better against the run. It's that's why I have Nolan Smith in the top 15 and Nick Hampton is a day 2 guy. But, as pass rushers, Nick Hampton's really, really good. Really good. And you can't look me dead in the eye and say Dennis Gardeck got 7 or 8 sacks in the NFL and Nick Hampton won't. So I really like Nick Hampton. I'm probably higher on him than most people because I'm a believer that small pass rusher can work in the NFL if you let them do it. And he's a freaky enough athlete that I think he could do it.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think we all have folks like that we see a certain path to success or a certain role. And I don't know about you, but I get happier when I find that for the guy. Like Trenton Simpson was one of those guys for me this year. I just people are like, is he an edge? Is he an inside backer? I'm like, he's a Sam. Not very many people use Sams anymore, like true Sams, but Trenton Simpson is a true Sam. And I just got happy when I was like, Trenton Simpson is a Sam. He'd be a damn good Sam. I realize it's not in high demand, but when I find that right fit, there were a couple of guys that I DM'd you the other night about, man, as soon as I put him in DE, I was like, yes, I feel better because I have a distinction between DE and edge. But I'll just run through the positions really quick and give 1 to 3 guys that I'm higher on. Quarterback for me, it's Clayton Tune, Jaron Hall, and DTR. All 3 of those players, I feel like I'm probably higher on than a lot of people. Wide receiver, Antoine Green, we already talked about him. Puka, I know the injuries are a thing, but Puka is a transcendent player when he's healthy. We'll see if he gets to be healthy. And then most of the guys we mentioned, like Josh Downs, I think are probably a lot of people like Josh Downs, but I think are probably higher on Josh Downs than
I think the Discord had him at wide receiver 3. So
right
there.
I was going to say something about the Discord and I always in alignment, but not necessarily true.
One of the few times.
Yeah, no, I have a ton of respect for the amount of work they've done. If I'm going to defensive, let me do running back really quick. Charbonnet. I have Charbonnet as I think RB3. And I think he deserves to be there. Roshan Johnson. And then farther on down, there's so many reasons not to have him there, but Keaton Mitchell, I just can't look away from Keaton Mitchell. You put him in the right situation and he is literally lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
His explosive plays per attempt is a third. Every third play goes for more than 10 yards,
which is just, it's outrageous.
Staggering. Half of that is really good. A lot of really good backs in this class, Bijan Robinson, are in the 15s, 15.7%. That's a good mark. That's a really good mark. Keaton Mitchell's at 30. It's outlier stuff. Talked about some of the offensive linemen I like. A lot of the guys we saw at Shrine Bowl. Juice Scruggs, higher on him. Stromberg, higher on him. I feel like the center from Michigan, Olatimi, is a guy that I continually don't hear very much about. And I think he's a very solid player.
I have not seen a single person mention him in 3 months.
I know. And I don't know what's going on because I look at the tape and I'm like, it's the same thing with you and Corey Trace. I'm like, I want to reach out to somebody. Am I crazy? Is this guy a really good center that's going to play 6 or 7 years in the league and anchor a line? It feels like that, and nobody talks about him. Like nobody. Defensive end, I think Mike Morris is a guy that wasn't used in a way that he'll be used in the pros, and in his very limited usage in that role, in the times that he actually got to pass rush, he was really effective, but he just didn't get to do it very much. Explosive athlete. He's not great against the run, but he's big, he's long, he's really explosive. I think he could be great. And then Fehoko, I'm an outspoken guy, and then both the Louisville guys, Diaby and Abdullah, for different reasons, different roles, but like I think they're both probably going to outperform their draft status. Maybe not Diaby after the combine. He's been up a little bit. Inside linebacker, I have Nick Herbig as an inside linebacker. I know a lot of people have him at edge.
I put him with edge. Yeah.
That's another thing where I had him at edge and I just felt like he's too small and he doesn't do anything backwards. So it's almost like you're trying to move this guy who's 240 pounds to DE, and he's definitely not a DE. And you talked earlier about having a player. It was Tillman, and you were talking about press reps, and you said you had very few opportunities. So what I went in is I found all the plays where he was the primary target in coverage. And again, at Wisconsin, they didn't ask him to do it a lot. They didn't ask him to do him none. There are certainly edges who have way less coverage reps than he does. He has like 95 total, but he was only targeted primarily on like 30 of them or like 27 of them. So I went and I watched all of them. He's good. Like in the role that a pass coverage edge would play, he's good. Like he had 3 PBUs in 30 primary targets.
That's why I think he could play Sam.
Yeah, I think he's
for that
natural Sam fit, just like we said for Trenton Simpson. So it's kind of, I put him at ILB because I really feel like Sam is not edge. Again, it's a more niche role in the current NFL, but I got really happy when I was like, that's what Herbig could do. And when I went and looked at all his pass reps, again, he's one of those guys. It reminds me of Kittle, another Big Ten guy who wasn't asked to do the role he primarily plays in the NFL. In college, he got there and it was like, oh, he can do it. And I feel like Herbig would be one of those guys. You put him in pass coverage in training camp and you'd be like, damn, he's right there. Like he's right where he needs to be. He didn't get asked to do it a lot, but he's got the skills. So he's one that's just kind of off the beaten path that I'm a little bit higher on. Corner, there's a million because there's a million corners. Safety, I'd probably say JL Skinner from Boise State because, man, when that guy's on, I mean, he tore his pec and he's kind of out of the conversation, but like 6'3", 6'4", over 200 pounds will absolutely lay the lumber. There's a play, I think it's against Utah State, and they faked, it was a punt, it was a fake, and went for a pass, and he hospitaled the guy that was supposed to receive that ball. Like he came from 7 or 8 yards behind him on a crossing route on this fake punt pass. And
he's got good feet and hips too for a big guy.
Plays the ball down the field, high point, tips things away,
abnormal.
Plays with good position. Like he's just got everything. And again, I feel like even before the injury, not a ton of people were talking about him, and he's like my safety 3, 4, something like that. Like he's way up.
Probably going to be. I bet he was going to be a day 2 pick before he tore his pec, and he still might be. Who knows? He still might.
Yeah, I feel like with the safety depth in this class, but again, just not a guy that a ton of people are talking about. And then there's some true deep sleepers, but that's a smattering of guys I go through, and I either don't hear about them or I hear about them in a different context, and I'm like, man, like that guy can get it done.
Andrew Moore for $10. Thank you, Andrew. Who do y'all see Dallas taking at the first round? I've seen Bijan or a tight end mocked to them, but I think they'll go for a lineman or an edge. I don't think Bijan's going to get there. I mean, maybe like outside chance. If Bijan gets there, he's the natural pick just because it's such an outrageous value in terms of where he's on the big board versus pick 25. In terms of tight end, considering age and injury, I don't think it would be Dalton Kincaid. I think you're more likely to see Michael Mayer there. Michael Mayer there makes a lot of sense. Again, if he gets there, sort of a big if. But he's TE1 for a lot of people, and for good reason. In terms of lines on either side, projected right now, if I recall correctly, It's Tyron still at left tackle, Tyler Smith at guard, Biotish at center, Martin at right guard, and then Steele at right tackle. If I recall correctly, that's like this projected starting five.
It is.
You don't need anything for that. Depth, possible, but I think Tyler Smith is the depth for Tyron Smith. So really you're looking at guard depth, which you're going to get on day 2 anyway. So if you're looking anywhere in the trenches, it's going to be on the defensive side where we're looking at DeMarcus Lawrence and Sam Williams. We're looking at Micah Parsons as like a do-it-all linebacker / edge. Osa Odighizuwa is a really tremendous 3 technique. Kind of supplanted Gallimore there. And then Jonathan Hankins at nose, but they could use a young nose. So I think, again, that's a Mozzie Smith destination potentially.
Yeah.
Just because out of anything on the defense.
I would think. Not at 20 round. I would think with nose that they would wait just because of positional value. They can get a really good player.
Traditionally, they haven't taken nose early.
Yeah.
That's something they've always avoided early. But if there's nothing else there and they can't get out of the pick, just, break glass in case of emergency. Again, Mozzie Smith is like, that's a general trend, is like, we know he's a good player. So if you just need a good player, at corner, they're fine at corner because they got Stephon Gilmore, and obviously they still got Trayvon. They got Jordan Lewis. Like maybe safety. How do we feel about Donovan Wilson and Malik Hooker?
Hooker when he's on in that role at free is extremely good, but it's the when he's on piece. And then Donovan Wilson, it feels like it's really a 3-pack of Wilson, Jaron Kearse, and Mukuamu that they bring in sort of in dime rotations and rotate around that. And then they still behind him, they've got Wanya Thomas, who's a guy that we saw from Georgia Tech at the Shrine Bowl 2 years ago. They got Marquise Bell, who was one of my gems from last year. Like, that roster rolls surprisingly deep. I was looking at interior offensive line, and Brock Hoffman, Alec Lindstrom, both guys that we have seen up close. Matt Waletsko, who we liked. He was in our Ball of Clay episode from last year. So, like, either the Cowboys are bootleg listeners, or we just see things really similarly, because a lot of guys that we've talked about and liked have ended up on their roster. Safety. I mean, you're talking, Sheldrick Redwine is 4 deep for them.
Yeah, chat was saying, so Kearse is still in Dallas. Yes, I'm aware about that. Kearse is different. Kearse is the classic third safety that you bring in as the tight end eraser.
Yeah,
plays within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. Yeah, it's like a hybrid safety linebacker to me, where it's like he plays the run extremely well. So you have him within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage because he's going to play his ass off and make tackles in space and all that kind of stuff. But if we're playing quarters, or we're playing quarter, half, or half, quarter, and we need a safety where it's like, hey, you got to carry a slot receiver that runs 4-4-2. That's not Jaron Kearse. Like, they put him in the role they put him in for a reason. So when we say safety, we're not replacing Jaron Kearse, because Kearse does what Kearse does better than most safeties. It would be about one of the other guys. Like, if there's I guess, again, depends on how you see, like, Quan Martin. Like Quan Martin would be somebody. Actually, that goes back to the last question. Who's somebody you're higher on than everybody else? Quan Martin for me. Jartavius Martin from Illinois. Like, elite nickel, has the range to play safety on the back end. Like, I see him as like, a Javon Holland type of guy for me. So if we're going safety, again, we're not replacing Kearse. It's more so about challenging the other 2 guys. Quan Martin would be somebody I would look at there.
For sure. I love his game. He ended up as a corner for me. Whereas another guy that has a similar skill set, Brian Branch, ended up as a safety for me. That's a bit capricious. It's more just, neither here nor there. They're both playing defensive back. They can both play a ton of slot. They can play deeper than that. It's where a coach in the NFL sees them with their greatest value, but they're great players, and the versatility is not going to do anything but help them.
Kyle Smith for $20. Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate that. Saw some talk about the 15-yard tiptoe backpedal Bryce Young needs to see the middle of the field and how it affects his timing / hitting throwing windows, or timing hitting throwing windows. Will his deep drop work in the NFL, and can an OC tweak route concepts to account? So we actually have a discussion with JT O'Sullivan.
I was going to say, we should probably like not answer it and just say, watch the JT O'Sullivan pod, because we spent like 7 minutes talking about this exact thing. The depth of Bryce Young's drops and what adjustments need to be made and how he saw that and everything else. It's all in there. Again, that's going to come out either later today or early tomorrow. But
I mean, he did pay $20, so I am going to answer it. But
yeah, answer it
to expand on what JT says and everything like that. Will it work in the NFL? Yes, because we've seen it work in the NFL with, again, lofty comparison, Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes would get himself into trouble all the time doing these super deep drops because he wanted to buy time. Not that Mahomes can't see over the line, but it felt like he was more comfortable the deeper he was, because you have it's just space to escape. And then all of a sudden defenses realized that he was going to drop 11 yards deep. So they started taking different angles with their edge rushers, and they would just meet him there. And it was really hard on the offensive tackles because the landmarks change. And typically the most comfortable depth for an offensive tackle for the quarterback to be at is about 8 to 9 yards. If you go to 11, the angle is it's not as sharp. So it's a lot easier for an edge to get that angle. And that's something that Bryce Young's future team will have to account for, is the fact that he sits at, 9 yards conservatively and sometimes deeper than that. So you need explosive offensive tackles. Conveniently, Ike Ekwonu is one of those. So they're fine on the left side in Carolina, but you need explosive offensive tackles that can get out to that corner quickly and choke off that angle, because if they don't do it, Bryce Young's going to get killed. And so it's not impossible to overcome. It makes it harder for unathletic tackles. That's the big thing. If you're going to have a guy like Bryce Young, you need to have athletic tackles. Doesn't mean it can't work. It just means you have to build your team differently. And, I don't think that that's the reason you pass on Bryce Young. There's a lot of reasons you could pass on Bryce Young. That's not it. And it still works. He still has great field vision. He still has great accuracy and ball placement and all that kind of stuff. It just means hey, don't put a turnstile out at right tackle and you're fine.
Yeah. And he's probably going to have a hard cap, where in terms of JT talks about not limiting the good things that Bryce Young does, the excellent and amazing things that he brings as a quarterback and creativity and whatever else, but also saying, look, there's a vertical limit to what you can do here. Horizontally, we love what you do when you get out of the pocket, but don't go to 15 yards or 17 yards to get out, right? Do what you do, but there's a vertical limit. We're going to start you further back, and we know you're comfortable there, and that's fine, but we're not going to be playing at 15 and 17 typically. So work it at 12 and 13. And again, because it's going to make the ease of the exterior angle on the tackle better.
Yeah. Hendog for 1999. Thank you, Hendog. Appreciate that. Dream first and second round for my Chiefs is Flowers at 31 and Ojulari in the second, then tackle in the third. So again, we are not news people. But what I can say is that Patrick Mahomes' workout with Zay Flowers went very well. If the Chiefs are going to get Zay Flowers, it ain't at 31.
No, they're going to move.
He's not getting there to begin with. They would have to go up for him. And I think they would if Mahomes tells them to. It will be expensive. And so there will have to be a discussion on that. But we know Mahomes likes him, and that workout went really well. And I have to imagine at this point what Patrick wants, Patrick gets. So we'll see if they can get it done.
Yeah, my guess is it would have to be middle of the first round.
Easily, if not higher.
I don't think it'll be a lot higher, but you start to get to 14, 15, 16, the dead middle of the first round. And that's any time after that, he could go off the board. So if that's your move, if that's whatever, they're going to have to look to get in that range. 15 picks in the first round, even if it's the bottom half of the first round, not cheap. Yeah. They will give up assets to do it. I'm more interested in your Ojulari in the second, because we're just talking about Ojulari with another analyst, and he's incredibly young. Most people don't realize he's 20. Like you look at his body type and how big he is and how grown he is, and you think, man, that guy's not even done growing. The immediate thing I thought when you put his name up there was, oh, Spags. Spags would love like that. He'd want to toughen up a little bit on setting an edge, but that length, the eventual power he's going to have when he really finishes filling out, which he's not even done doing yet, and then the ability to work stunts with the rest of that front athleticism of Chris Jones and Derek Nottie being the sort of pin and pull around for the defensive line. Like Ojulari would be a Spags fit there in a big way. Like that would be fun.
And he would, honestly, Ojulari would be one of the bendiest rushers Spags has had. He's always kind of trended towards the,
tougher, the Karlaftises of the world.
Turns like a battleship going through a glacier. Like that's always been their type. They need something else. For the love of God, they need somebody who
we talk about building rooms and what you don't have, and I think what he would be willing to give up is maybe that approach without giving up the frame. And with Ojulari, he's not as heavy as the guys that Spags typically takes, but he is as long. Like he's got super long arms. And
BJ is a better prospect than Aziz, not going to lie. I would agree with that. And it's not like I disliked Aziz, but like BJ is just,
I think really Aziz was more narrow to me as in terms of skill set. He was like Nolan Smith with less edge setting.
Yeah, I can see that. Cure for $10. Thank you, Cure. Is it just me, or does Yasir Abdullah seem like a perfect Patriot? Also, who do you see at 46? He's absolutely a perfect Patriot because they actually use Sam linebackers there.
And versatility. They love versatility. And Abdullah can go forward for you, backwards for you, be effective in both roles. He'll bring speed, intensity. He's a very smart player. He's a player that's bettered himself mentally in terms of building his own pass rush repertoire based on what's worked and what hasn't and where he's been frustrated. He's gone back. He's got a pass rush coach, and he's sort of built his own mental Rolodex of what he's doing. And Patriots love smart players. They love versatile players, and they use a Sam, a heavy linebacker. So it's not just you.
Autumn for $5. Thank you, Autumn. Thank you for coming back. Hey, all just popping by and saying hi. How's the new house? Also thoughts on Orlando Brown Jr. signing. Well, everything that you don't see is all the destruction in my office. I'm actually in the office right now. I'm not in the kitchen because Nikki's working from home today. So she's working in the kitchen. And we'll get there. We have 2 liquor cabinets that got delivered. And so we're going to build those, and right over on the other side, there's like a 200 bottle collection that's been sitting on the floor for 7 weeks. So we're going to get the liquor cabinets built and then get the bottles off the ground. And then from there, get some photos on the wall and build out an office set. And, we'll get there. Moving from a house into an apartment is harder than I anticipated. We have a lot of shit that we got to throw away, but little by little, I think in the off season, like after draft season, that's also been a complicating factor. Is like moving in the middle of draft season was really stupid on my part. But
okay, can Nikki hear us?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, it's a lie.
What is?
We both have these lists. Like, I'll do it after the draft.
I mean, we'll get there, EJ.
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. This is what draft analysts do, folks. Like for 3 or 4 months, if it is not like mission critical, it's like, I'll do it in May. I'll do it in June. I'll do it after the draft. Right? We get to after.
Honey, I got to prepare for the off-season episodes.
Yeah, right. It's a lie. We're not. There'll be a short break, but all this like, I'll reorder my life after the draft. We lie to ourselves. We have to.
We sleep for a week and then get back to it.
That's right.
As for thoughts on the Orlando Brown Jr. signing, I think the money was what surprised me. Like, it's a very affordable contract. And I think that deal for Cincy, which was a good deal, objectively, team-friendly deal, that showed that playing left tackle and honoring his father was the most important thing to Orlando. I think, when he came in, he's like, I want $25 million a year and all that kind of stuff. I think when push came to shove and it was, do you want less money or do you want to play left tackle? or do you want more money and play right, or do you want less money and play left tackle? He prioritized playing left tackle because that's a spot his dad played, and he wants to play a position his dad played. And I think he's been very upfront about that from the beginning, even when he was in Baltimore. And I think when push came to shove, he prioritized honoring his father, which is totally understandable. And since he got a great deal out of it. So, I think all parties got what they wanted. Like, again, Orlando's still making a shitload of money. He's not hurting for cash.
No.
Gets to play left tackle. He's an upgrade over what Cincy had last year, in my opinion. Like, even though Orlando gave up a lot of pressures, he didn't give up as many like quick sacks under 2 seconds as Jonah Williams. So, like, I still think it's an upgrade. Yeah, it seemed to fit everybody at the same time. I think it was good. Best part
Jason asked real quickly in the chat, what do you guys think of Daniel Scott, the Cal safety? He's freaking awesome. I love him to death. Should have had him in my list of guys that I was higher with. Like, he's on my list. I like him a lot. He's a guy that I've really sort of come up on as I've gone through. Started pre-combine, combine made it better, went back to more tape after that. That made it even better. Like, he's definitely a guy that's ascended on my board.
I really like his ball skills. I kind of want, there's some guys where I see as a safety, it's like, I want this safety to be towards the line of scrimmage. I want this safety to be as far from the line of scrimmage as I possibly can, because I want to put range and ball skills to use and give them opportunities. He's one of the guys that I want like 20 yards deep, not 5 yards deep, because I think his best skill set is, hey, we're in cover 2. Ooh, they're trying that hole shot. Daniel, go get the ball. Like, that's what I want him to go do, is go get me the ball.
One of my favorite reps of him is cover 3 in Cal, and he picks it off.
Oh,
in the end zone.
that long, that
because
long
he float.
Yeah.
If you watch early from that play, and you need all 22 to see it, because he starts at like 15 yards deep, and the first thing he does is backpedal like 7 or 8 yards, and he just keeps floating, but with his eyes in the backfield, right? And he floats this big, like, crazy S pattern because he's following what's going on with the play and staying deeper than the deepest, right? He's the deep middle safety in cover 3. He knows he's got the whole field. He can't let anybody get by him regardless of coverage. And he just sort of floats, and then he figures out, well, everything else is faded off. Like, the only option left is this guy. And he basically just pins it on a corner to get back there, beats the guy to the point, and high points the ball, picks it off in the end zone. But the whole way you can, like, see his process, right? And he's very fluid as an athlete. He's bigger than you think. He's 6 foot tall. He's in great shape, and he's just got a really good sense of spacing. And that's not, some guys can only do that going backwards. Daniel Scott can do it backwards or forwards. He cuts off short crosses, runs underneath tight end routes. Like, I like him a lot. He's a good player.
Cody Gerard for $5. Thank you, Cody. The Giants have an excess of small, fast guys, as does the top of this wide receiver class. Should they trade back into the second and look at someone like Tillman? I think it depends on where and how expensive it would be. I mean, yes, like, ideally, yes. Whether it's Tillman, whether it's Mingo, whether it's Perry, I don't think it matters which one. But one of those should be a Giant if they could swing it.
Yeah, and there's guys in this draft class that have size. They're not the biggest names, but they are dotted throughout this class, and there's not near as many, you're right, as the smaller, fast guys. There's a ton of those guys. You can get one of those by throwing a stick.
I do want to ask, when you say trade back into the second, you mean going up further, or do you mean going back from like 26 or what? Maybe he means going back from the first.
Well, it's possible, but
takes 2 to tango.
Those bigger guys are gonna have a premium on them, but there are guys at every level. So we've talked about Tillman, obviously. Perry's got size. We talked about Mingo. I talked about Antoine Green. Grant Bose from Charlotte is a favorite of mine. He should be on my higher list. I am much higher on Grant Bose than most people. So at your level where you want a bigger guy, you can go get one. Obviously, you're going to be giving up more and more as you go, getting less, because if that guy could do everything, he would be in the first round. But there are those guys. They're just fewer and farther between. And because of that, they might go half a round earlier than you think they, quote unquote, should, because somebody's looking and they're like, hey, we need some size at wide receiver. There's only 3 guys left. Do we want this one? We don't like the other 2. Okay, we have to do it now, even though the value of the board says, oh, maybe wait half a round. He won't be here. when we get to the next round, it'll be the other two guys, and we don't like them for whatever reason.
Mr. Busto for $10. Thank you, Busto. What 4 players would you guys love to end up in Detroit in the first 2 rounds? 4 players.
There was one earlier. Didn't we have a chat earlier that listed out like Detroit's?
Yeah, it was like I think it was Witherspoon, Flowers, which is not no. It was trading back with the Titans. That's what it was. Yeah. It was trading back with the Titans, and they got JSN at 11.
Right.
They got Mozzie Smith. They got Campbell, and they got it's one of the corners. Might have been Campbell, like Joey Porter or something.
Fourth, yeah. I was like, that was a pretty damn good haul. Like,
take that.
Yeah, like snapshot right there. Like, if that happens, like Brad Holmes drops the mic, walks off, says, "You guys can do the rest. Take it from here. We got what we needed." No, he's obviously a draft lifer and he'll stay to the end. But that would be a vicious start as a Bears fan. Would not like that at all. As somebody that just likes watching good football, like I'd be like, oh yeah, that team's gonna be a lot better this year, and they were good last year.
Chris Haskell for $10. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. Did you mean to put in a question there? Maybe you did. I'll have to look through the chat and see if you asked something there. Find a cure for $2. What round does Zach Kuntz go in? Big tight end that can run.
Yeah, but
I don't know.
He's one I struggle with in this draft class. Like, I don't not like him. Let's start with that. But it's all about what you think you're going to be able to get out of him, not what has been gotten out of him before. And all teams value production scores. They do that at different levels. Zach Kuntz's production scores are like, he has never produced a lot. And that's when he was at Penn State, when he went to Old Dominion. Like, he's just not a guy that's produced a lot. And so what are you getting? And my guess is because of that, even despite the physical gifts and all the sky high potential, people are going to look at a reality and go, I'm not going sooner than the 4th, probably 5th, maybe.
Just on potential. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Matthew Wright for $5. Which running back do you see the Niners taking in the 3rd round that they will never use, and which UDFA RB takes his place? Israel Abanikanda for sure. is that 3rd rounder that they will never use, even though he's like everything lines up where he's like the ideal Kyle Shanahan running back. Will never get a single carry. Will last 2 years in the league if he goes to San Francisco. He'll go anywhere else, he'll play 10 years. Go to San Francisco, he'll play 2, because that's how the universe likes to punish me. As for UDFAs that will replace him, I feel like Dwayne McBride, the polar opposite type of prospect, would well, maybe Dwayne wouldn't go undrafted, but in terms of like
go undrafted, but he will go lower than a lot of people think, like, because he is super narrow.
But let's get a 4.6 running back out of nowhere. Give him 200 carries. That's so Niners. Or like Tyon Evans from Louisville. That seems to fit the bill.
Yeah, Tyon's more of a pounder for me. I'm looking at guys that sort of fit that wide zone, outside zone profile that we've looked at before. When we looked at JaMychal Hasty, we were like, man, if he ends up going to San Francisco, and of course he does, like, he's going to do well. Keaton Mitchell's a guy I mentioned earlier who put that guy in outside zone and just let him pick a spot and take off. They tend to like him a little bit bigger than that in terms of girth, in terms of size. But I had one here. I could see Deneric Prince. He's going to get drafted, but Deneric Prince from Tulsa. He's taller than they normally get, but he's fast. And he has that big sort of, I don't want to say straight line, but curve linear speed, not necessarily sharp cutting speed, but when he opens it up, he's really fast. I could see that. And then X Valade from Arizona State would be super fun for them because he'd bring a little bit of that Debo versatility because he's really good catching the ball as well. And pretty fast when he opens it up, could definitely pick an outside hole. He'd be a lot of fun in that offense too.
Paxman for $5. Buy or sell. Bijan round 1. Carter top 5. 3 or more wide receivers in the first round. 2 quarterbacks traded during the draft. this year's draft stream will be the biggest. Well, that part I agree on.
Yeah,
Yes.
four's a lock. I would say that's buy.
Bijan round 1 is buy. Carter top 5 sell. 3 or more wide receivers in the first round buy. 2 quarterbacks traded during the draft. So Rodgers is 1. Who'd be this? Oh, Lance. Buy. I'll go buy.
Yeah, you're all buys. Bijan round 1, I think will happen. If you'd asked me a month ago, I would have been sort of 50-50, not on talent, just on sort of reticence. And again, I think I probably still would have said yes for those last like 5 picks. Somebody, if they haven't picked him by then, like Bijan to Buffalo would be a lot of fun. Carter top 5. No. Carter top 9. Yes. Like sell, buy. 3 or more wide receivers in the first round.
You just need to get one more other than Zay and JSN.
Yeah, Zay and JSN, I'd say for sure. And then, yeah, I think one more goes. And whether it's a wild Mingo sighting or somebody sneaks in on Tillman or somebody wants Jalen Hyatt to go vertical and surprises everybody and everybody goes, oh, he wasn't worth it. Like, yeah, I would say 3, not necessarily more than 3. 2 QBs traded during the draft.
It depends on if you think Lance is getting traded.
Right. I would say, yeah, but that's the one I'm shakiest on. Draft stream will be the biggest, like no doubter. That's the home run over the 250-foot fence. That's going to clear it by 100 feet.
NJ Snipes for $10. Thank you, Snipes. What's your thoughts on a first round edge for the Chargers? Maybe I'm wrong, but edge looks really thin after Bosa and Mac. I think that is their break glass in case of emergency. Because like they have other needs that are more important, but if they are not Jalen Hyatt at 21 type of folks, and Zay is long gone, and JSN would be gone too. If they're not Jordan Addison at 21 type of folks, and I could see it. I could really see it. Again, it also depends on what's happening at tackle.
Yeah, and who's there, really.
And who's there. But like if they're staring down the barrel of like, let's see, looking at my edge rankings, if they're staring down the barrel of, what would you say for like Felix Anudike-Uzomah, like at 21? Like I could see it.
I was thinking about it from the power profile. He was one of the guys I looked at. Again, it's more about where the Chargers are and less about how I feel about the edge class. I agree with you that depth is not necessarily there, and they could use a rotational guy because Mac's getting to the point in his career, age-wise, and Bosa just has always been there health-wise. You don't want those guys taking 700-800 snaps. That's not effective. You want them taking 550 and being just fire breathers every single time. It's really about who's going to fall in that like 20s-ish range for edge, and it's going to be was there a run after Anderson and Wilson? There's going to be a couple more in there, but is it a couple or is it 4?
Yeah.
If it's 4, they would probably go to another position just because somebody would be higher ranked on their board at that point, and they'll go into the rest of the edge class later and still get somebody. Yeah, I like Felix from his physical profile, but I could see a Foskey.
Be a little bit of
I wouldn't do
flavor.
it, but in terms of what they want, like,
yeah, I could see that. It would be the absolute maximum highest that he could go to me.
Yeah,
like,
and then
by far.
I'm thinking edge versus DE in my head, but lots of teams have those run together. If Miles Murphy's floating around,
yeah,
I could see that trigger getting pulled real quick.
Yeah, no, 100%, because he can play 5 for them, and 6, and 9.
Yeah,
he can kind of go all over. So I could see that.
I could see that happening, and that would be attractive, I think, to Telesco and the Chargers, in that it fits their profile in a lot of ways. Like, I would be more rubber stamp on that than any of the other guys we mentioned.
Jared for $5. Thank you, Jared. Where would you guys rank Brees and K9 in this class? Personally, they'd be RB2 and 3. I'm right there with you. K9 would be my RB2 behind Bijan. Brees would be my RB3 behind K9. just like I had him last year, except you just throw Bijan on top. I don't even think it would be particularly close because I think Bijan would be his own tier. K9 and Brees would be the tier 1B or whatever. And then it's everybody else. Like there's nobody else in this class that I think is close to those two.
Yeah. Same. Walker first over Brees, underneath Bijan, because Bijan's Bijan. He's that unicorn. He's like Kyle Pitts. He doesn't really. Every time you want to stack him up, we talked about all that draft ranking, stacking stuff we do for clusters where this is better than this guy. Like you just put Bijan at the top and like nobody goes above it the whole time and nobody really has during the process. Every time you really thought that somebody might be edging close in one particular skill set, you go watch again and you're like, no.
The real question is Bijan versus Saquon.
Yeah, I don't know that that's a real question though, because they're years apart. It's kind of like saying, oh well, Walter Payton or Emmitt Smith. Well, how many years apart were they? Like a lot.
Did they have? No, they didn't have any overlap, did they?
They did have a little bit of overlap at the end of the career, but that's not the point. The point is like, so what? Like that's like saying, would you rather take Otto Graham or Roger Staubach? Like, well, I guess
Terry Bradshaw or Mitch Trubisky. Two Steelers greats.
Are they not the same?
I mean, I don't know. Tuli Tuipulotu for the Chargers. Ooh, that would be actually,
Yes, please. Like that, but probably in the second, but still, yes, please. I 100% love that move.
I don't know, man. Like, I know you also love Tuli, so you'd sign off on this too. But like, I don't know. 21 doesn't seem that rich.
Oh, I wouldn't have trouble with value. I would still love the pick. I know a lot of Chargers fans would howl and say, oh, he'd be there in a second or whatever. But like from a fit standpoint, what their need and his fit and just that player, that guy. Yeah, I would love that in a lot of ways.
I wouldn't hate it. All right. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen,
yes.
I have to hit the road to San Diego in about 10 minutes. And as per usual,
which means you're already late.
Already late. Mathematically, we can never get to every single super chat in every single stream. We try to get to as many as humanly possible. Once again, I invite you, if I missed your super chat, please send me a DM on Twitter, and I will answer your question there. We will be back for another stream on
Wednesday.
Yes, Wednesday.
Eve, yes.
We'll be in Kansas City there. He will also be coming on my mock draft stream Wednesday morning, and then we're doing a bootleg stream after that, and then we're going to KC Beer Co. in Wednesday. So if you're in town in Kansas City for the draft, please come on by 7 to 9 local at KC Beer Co. I think it's down by Overland Park. I got streams coming on Film Room on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We got bootleg streams on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then we're doing the draft recap episode on Sunday. And then we fly. I think
then Monday we fly. Yes.
I'm recording literally every day for a week.
Yeah. Don't be like that.
I'll sleep later.
It's going to be like that. But thanks everybody for stopping by today. We realized the stream was a little bit differently timed. That was purposeful for some of our viewers overseas. We want them to have a chance to not have to stay up in the middle of the night and be able to participate. And, hey, maybe it wedged you out of work a little bit early today, and you can't be too sad about that. But everybody that stopped by, we had great participation and awesome questions as always. We're going to see you a bunch over the next week. So next time will be Film Room talking about your mock draft, and then the Draftmas Eve stream, and just onward and sideways from there.
We'll see you guys very soon.